All right, guys, welcome back. So today we're going to get back into, I know the hair's coming in. It's a little sporadic, whatever, but it's getting hot and I can't do it anymore. But today we're going to dip back into our whiskey 101. This is going to be part two. It could be a couple other parts to go along with it. And if you remember from the first video, we went back and we started from the beginning, kind of telling you what whiskey was, what it's not, the differences between bourbon and scotch and stuff like that. So now we're going to dive a little deeper, and we're going to get into some connotations of different bottles. And I have a whole bunch of bottles around me that we are going to talk about just real fast. We're going to skim over it. And if you want to go into more detail, we can go into more detail about it and kind of segment it out if we want to. It's a lot. There's a lot to talk about. So first we're going to talk about scotch, okay? And the reason is because it has very defined segments of it. We talked last time that single malt scotch, right? We talked about single malt scotch. So we're not going to we'll overview it, but we're not going to go into it too deep. So a single malt scotch is simply that: one distillery, one grain, and made in Scotland, right? That grain being barley. Okay, so 95% of the ones that we're going to talk about, well, not really, are going to be made with barley. It has to be 3 years old, minimum 3 years old to even be called scotch. Okay. And so single malt, normally denoting pot still. Okay. Now, then there's different regions of Scotland, like we talked about, Islay, Campbelltown, Highland, Lowland, anyway. So yeah, I know it gets a little it'll get to you fast. And that's why I wanted to do these 101s, just to help those people who they know about stuff, but they don't, and I'm not saying I know everything. And please, if I'm not, if I'm saying something incorrectly, please, in the comments below, please let me know. So now we're going to talk about blended. There's some monkey shoulder. My son got me, well, my son didn't, he's not old enough, but my son wrote his name on this bottle for me. I got it for a Father's Day or something like that. This is a blended malt scotch whiskey. Okay, so let's get into blended malt. Super easy. It's 2 distilleries or more. This one's actually 3 distilleries. I took the little thing off, but normally there's 3 monkeys right there, and that denotes the 3 distilleries that are involved in this. And that is all that is single malts that they got from 3 separate distilleries, put them together to make a blended malt. It has to be more than one, obviously. And that's all that means. The percentages, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be 33% of each. It just has to be anything that you add from another distillery. It is considered a blended scotch. And a lot of times that happens in whiskey too. You get blended whiskey, right? It's 2 or more distilleries. Normally that means it's a grain whiskey, but anyway, we'll talk about grain whiskey. Actually, we're going to talk about that right now, because that's basically all monkey shoulder, and all the blended malts are multiple distilleries single malt. Okay, which means barley, right? So then we move on to single grain. I don't have, and I know, I'm a horrible person. I don't have any single grain bottles to show you. I will look for one and it'll be up here somewhere. Okay. It's single grain. So basically that's any other grain besides barley. It could be corn, wheat. It can be a mixture of grain. Like in Scotland, they cannot do what they call a bourbon mash bill, but they could do a bourbon mash bill and do it in a single grain. Most of the time it's corn or wheat. But anyway, so single grain is just that. one distillery, grain whiskey. Normally it's done on a column still and distilled higher, like you would a light whiskey. And we're going to get into light whiskey. Okay, so that's done. And then there is a blended grain whiskey. Okay, what does that mean? Same thing. It's grain distillery, came together, 2 barrels or more, came together, mixed their product together. You have a blended grain. Hedonism from Compass Box is a blended grain whiskey. Okay, so then after that, you've got the 2, you have grain whiskey, single grain, and then blended grain, single malt, blended malt. Okay, then what's after that? What happens if you get a blended malt and a blended grain and put them together? It's called a blended scotch. And I do have that one. This is the White Walker edition of Johnny Walker from the Game of Thrones. And remember, I don't know if y'all remember the last time, it said winter is here. When you got it cold, you stuck it in the freezer, it got cold. Wasn't a great whiskey. I'm not going to lie. This was not a great whiskey. I finished it, obviously, but I'm not a baby. I could finish it. But really cool packaging. And Johnny Walker's doing some really cool stuff. This was 41%. And it just, it's just whiskey, right? The flavor profile is a little shinier, stuff like that. So that's blended scotch. When you blend a grain and a malt, it's blended scotch, okay? And there's a bunch of those out there. A lot more of your lower tier ones, besides Johnny Walker, a lot more of your lower tier ones are going to be your blended scotches. Take that for what it is. That doesn't mean quality or anything like that. It just means your bottom shelf guys like your, I can't even, Grants and stuff like that. They're going to be blended scotches. Not bad. And the amount of single malt that's in there or blended malt is pretty small. It's more like 75% blended grain with 25% malt or something like that. So just understand that. Okay, so we got through scotch, right? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. And then the age statements, obviously, they go, and so you can have a single grain whiskeys that are super high age stated. What we would consider them as light whiskeys here in America. Here in America, light whiskeys basically are anything, and we talked about this, but I'm going to re-hit it again. Anything above 160 proof when you're coming off the still, up to 94.8% alcohol, right? So right after that, you turn into vodka, and it's a neutral grain spirit. So you go up to that threshold. Some people drop it down just a little bit more, but it's mainly a grain-based whiskey. So it makes it a lighter flavor. You can age it for a lot longer because they normally use used oak as well. Scotch in itself uses used oak for everything. There is a couple of them that are using what they call virgin oak, but that's normally how that goes. So it's a single grain whiskey is very comparative to light whiskey here in America. So just take that for what it is. All right, so let's get into different connotations. I know that's a hard word. Let's get into different connotations of different whiskeys that you see on the bottle, because the bottle can kind of be a little misleading sometimes if you don't really know what you're dealing with. So this is a good one. This is going to be a good one. So this is 1792. It's made out of Barton in Kentucky. On the front of it, it doesn't say anything except 1792. And then we're going to talk about this part. And it says full proof. Full proof. Get in, camera. Come on. Full proof. And this is actually a single barrel pick from Total Wine. Whatever. I picked it up a while back. I hadn't had a full proof, and so I picked it up. It's really good. Okay, so let's talk about full proof. Full proof meaning the max proof that they can put it in the barrel was 125, 62.5% for bourbon, right? Now we're on to bourbon territory. What they did is they made it to where when they bottled it, it was at 125 proof. So we talked about this before, but whiskey in a barrel in America, the alcohol rises. So the percentage of alcohol rises because it evaporates water, right? So it could have been 130 proof or even higher, depending. And so they would water it down just a little bit to get it to 125 exactly. Oh, I don't think it would have went the other way. They put some higher proof stuff in. They might, if it's at 122, they might put some higher proof stuff in there to crank it up. Now, this is a single barrel. So this single barrel was 125. They don't tell you what it was before. But anyway, really, really a good bottle. And it's a little hot, obviously, for 125 proof. So just when you look at that, if it says full proof or barrel proof is different. Barrel proof is going to be whatever they put it, take it out of the barrel with adding no water, right? So it could be anywhere from, if they're depending, 115 to 145. I mean, depending upon what part of the warehouse it was in and stuff like that. And we'll talk about that on a different one. I think that one will be a good one, talking about warehouse levels and stuff like that, and how you get your maturation and stuff like that. All right, let's move on to another one. Okay, here is Ben Holiday, bottled in bond, Missouri bourbon whiskey, right? So Missouri denotes the state. Straight bourbon means it's 2 years. Bottled in bond. On the side right here, it says, where does it say it? Oh, Lord. It didn't say it on this one. Is it not? 26, 6 years. 6 year, I'm sorry. It took me forever to do that. It's a 6-year-old bottled in bond. So let's talk about bottled in bond. We just celebrated Bottled in Bond Day. Not that it matters. It's not like a national holiday or something. In whiskey world, it is. But so Bottled in Bond basically was a government regulation that they had because people were making subpar whiskeys again. And it basically held these distilleries to government warehousing. And so it has to be distilled in one distilling season, right? So 1 year, and there's different, it used to be by crop rotation, right? So when the crops were there, and it had to be by the same distiller, couldn't be some other random dude, has to be in a bonded warehouse, like government regulated, which nowadays all whiskey warehouses are government regulated. So, and it has to be a minimum 4 years old. 4 years old, and it has to be bottled at 100 proof or 50% alcohol. That's the only guide. I mean, that's a stipulation, of course. But those are the guidelines for bottled and bond. And I have found that bottled and bond whiskeys are actually really good. I seek out bottled and bonds. They can be older than 4 years. They just have to be a minimum of 4 years. Okay. Does that make sense? And most of the time, if they're older than 4 years, they're going to tell you, like that would say 6. All right, let's move on to this one. So this one is Old Forester King Ranch Edition. So what does King Ranch Edition mean? I don't know. Well, it was a collaboration with the King Ranch, which is here in Texas, and it's a heavy charred barrels, and then they filtered it before, I think, they got mesquite from the King Ranch, and they made charcoal out of it, and they filtered it kind of like you would do with Tennessee whiskey, right? They filtered it through that mesquite, and then they had heavily charred barrels, which if you know anything about charring or charcoal does nothing to flavor, right? It doesn't flavor. The mesquite might have a little smokiness to it, but it doesn't do anything to flavor the whiskey. It filters the whiskey. So it's filtering the whiskey even more. And this one was, 52.5% or 105 proof. Okay. And this is a Kentucky straight bourbon, blah, blah, blah. And then it talks about their story with King Ranch. So this one was filtered, and they also used heavily charred barrels. And they just noted it on there. To me, it's very gimmicky. It wasn't great for my palate. I'll just say that. All right. one that is great for my palate. We're going to talk about Saints Alley. Saints Alley. Okay. This is a collaboration between the Liquor Hound and Iron Root Republic out of Denison. This is a blend of straight bourbon whiskeys finished in Pinot de Shiraz and Armagnac casks. Okay, so let's jump into that real fast. Okay, so it's a blend. So they blended whiskeys, right? Because this is partial MGP, so and partial Iron Root. So it's a blend of whiskeys, of straight bourbon whiskeys, and they're finished in the wine cask and the Armagnac cask. Okay, so we were having a little discussion about this, and I personally don't care. Okay, is that whiskey still considered a whiskey? Bourbon, is it still considered a bourbon? Because it was finished, right? It was finished in another barrel that was not a brand new oak barrel. There's a difference when, and I don't have the bottle on me, I'm sorry. There's a difference when you see the ones called double barreled or double oaked. They're taking it out of the barrel that it has, a brand new barrel. They're dumping it into another barrel that's brand new, double oaking it, right? Woodford, there's a bunch of double oaks out there. 13 Colonies has an amazing one. If you can find it, good luck. But with finishing, there it kind of puts it into a different category. Now for the whiskey enthusiasts, they don't care, right? But for the whiskey snobs, and I don't hate to say snobs because that sounds snobby. I'm not trying to be like that, but like what it turns it into is a distilled spirit specialty, right? It is still considered a whiskey, right? It's still considered a whiskey. It's just might not be considered a bourbon. But here's the caveat to that. They're trying to change laws to where they can still keep the age statement and keep all of that stuff on there. Now, this one is not age stated. It is straight bourbon whiskeys, so they're a minimum of 2 years old. But it's really like I personally, as a whiskey enthusiast, I don't care that it was finished. This was an amazing bottle. Like, oh my God, it was so good. It was so good. It was a special edition too, so good luck. You're not going to find it anymore. But I don't personally care about the nomenclature or whatever they call it on the bottle. Transparency is a thing, and it says on there it is a blend and that it was finished. That doesn't mean that it wasn't bourbon when it went into the finishing barrel. Does that make sense? Like, because it's a bourbon because it was in New American White Oak, right? First, and it was made in the USA, all that. We've already talked about that. And then they just put it in another barrel. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But there is something to be said about it. Okay. So now let's move on. We have one more. And this one is interesting. This one's interesting. So this is Methods of Madness. Methods of Madness is the stupid band. This is Method and Madness. This is a single pot still Irish whiskey, right? It was matured in sherry and bourbon barrels. Okay, so in Ireland, Scotland, any other place then with bourbon, they can age it in a oak vessel. One of them says oak vessel. The other one says on wood. On wood. But this is a experimental series that they're doing. And this was matured in sherry and bourbon barrels. Okay. So we know it has to be a minimum of 3 years old, right? To be considered Irish. But then it was finished in a chestnut cask. Chestnut. Obviously it was a great bottle, right? But the chestnut to me did not present as an off-putting flavor at all. It was mainly, it tasted a little, for lack of a better word, it tasted a little woody, for lack of a better word. Not woody like over oaked, but like woody like, like the lumber yard. when you go into the lumber yard and you just smell cedar and pine and oak and all of these other smells, it just smelled and tasted a little more woody, which I really enjoyed. It was unique. It was a little different because Irish can be a lot lighter and a lot the palate doesn't overwhelm you. I mean, unless you're getting some things do, but normally the palate is very tame. I'll say tame. So we got through all that. So then there's other finishings like French oak, right? French oak. You put it in a French oak. Now, you get new French oak? Yes, you can. Is it American white oak? No, it's not. There's European oak, Hungarian oak. There's toasted barrels. Okay, let's talk about toasted for a minute. What is toasted? Well, it's when you take a barrel that they're making a barrel out of wood, right? And instead of toasting and charring it, you just toast it. The charring, like I said, only acts as a filtration system, whereas the toast is where you get your flavorings from. Don't shoot me. So a toasted barrel is going to be a little lighter because when you char a barrel, it toasts it at the same time, right? It toasts it as it chars it. Well, it makes some of those compounds in the wood, it makes them stronger and stronger. So that's why with a normal bourbon barrel, you get a lot of vanillins and a lot of cherry and stuff like that. It's from the char and toast. Whereas with just toast, it's more like a marshmallow or creme brulee. It's a little lighter. It's different. It's a different finish. Only that's not considered finishing, I guess, because it's still a new barrel. Like there's the Michter's toasted right there above my head, and that was in a toasted barrel. Now they finished it in a toasted barrel, which still makes it a bourbon. But then again, those are all just like, you know what I mean? So don't take it too serious. And when you're out there and you see a bottle, I'm going to pick this one back up again, and it says bottled and bought under U.S. government. You know that it's, it has to at least be 100 proof, or it has to be 100 proof, and it'll tell, like this one tells you, what floor of the warehouse it was on and all kinds of stuff. So like just reading the label on a bottle, and like I said in a podcast earlier, a couple podcasts ago, that don't be afraid when you go to the liquor store and you're looking. You're not doing anything bad being there, right? I feel like they want to push you out of the liquor store pretty fast. Like, what do you want? Get out of here, So take your time. Look at the label. Look who's making it. If it's sourced and they're transparent about it, great. If you want to try something new, make sure that everything's like small batch and all. We've talked about that. Like, just make sure you know what you're getting into instead of just going and grabbing the bottle and running out because kids are yelling in the car and stuff like that. So just take a little time, and we'll get through this, and the next one we'll go into a little deeper into maybe some the different finishing options, which, I mean, we could talk about it real fast right now, I guess. There's all different types. You can finish literally in everything from amberana to honey to oh, you don't know what amberana is? No, amberana is a Brazilian wood that they use, and it makes things taste supposedly like Cinnamon Toast Crunch, or it's very cinnamon forward. But if it sits in too long, it smells and tastes like cat pee. So, it's kind of a double-edged sword there. And it imparts flavor very fast. And then there's port. You get port wine barrels and age in them, or sherry, or oh Lord, Armagnac, or there's so many, anything that used to hold something, beer, people do beer finishes, stouts and porters and stuff like that. Anything that was in that barrel, you can reuse it again. Mead, whatever, it doesn't matter. Don't do fish or pickles. That would be kind of weird. I know George Dickel did a Tabasco. Take that for what it is. It's hot and fiery and spicy, maybe. I don't know. It's not my flavor profile. I'll just say that. But yeah, I think that's it. probably it. Okay, so just look at the bottles when you're going in. Hopefully that clears up some of the stuff. And for most of you, this is a review, a refresher, whatever. But just take it for what it is. And thank you to the sponsors, Bad Motivator Barrels and Z.Smith Whiskey and Mixology. Please check them out. It'll be in the link below. And also we don't forget about the Patreon with patreon.com/the whiskey shaman. I'm trying to get things popping over there. So if you want to support the show monetarily, which that supports all gamuts of what I do, the YouTube, the podcast, everything. So they all kind of go together. You get special perks and stuff like that. Send out samples to you. And anyway, long story. I'm not going to beat that. But I appreciate all of you, and until next time, keep your spirits up. I can't talk. I don't know what the deal is.